Hello, it's Wayne here from Whiskey Alpha, and today I'm going to talk about something that's very dear to every student's heart. That's hours, or technically hours flown. All students seem to have this magical wish to pass within the minimum requirements. In the UK, the minimum requirements for a PPL is 45 hours. So every student almost is desperate we must pass within this 45 hours, and how many hours did you do before you went solo? How many hours did you do before you did your cross country? And then that magical, how many hours did you do before you passed your PPL? I initially, when I started, had some of that mindset, and as I got into it, I was thinking more along the lines of I'm going flying. I did have issues with my flying career in so much that I had COVID to deal with, so we had lockdowns, we had restarts, we then had at least 6 weeks or so where, although we were allowed to fly, we couldn't do circuits at our local aerodrome, so we had to fly further to do circuits. That meant my hours built up. And now that I've passed my PPL, initially I was a little bit embarrassed to say that I passed my PPL with 112 hours. Yes, I did say that right. I passed my PPL at 112 hours. I did 112 hours before I passed my PPL. Initially, I was quite embarrassed to say this, and I felt that it was, I wouldn't say a failure on my part, but clearly I was behind the curve when the average seemed to be much lower. However, when I started talking to people, including instructors at the school, other students, and people flying in general, it seems that the average appears to be around about, let's say, between 60 and 70 hours, and that's average based on normal operations. For the past 2 years, there hasn't been anything normal about flying in the UK. I think it really was drummed into me when the first person I ever flew with, one of my instructors, pointed out to me that he qualified several years ago with 90 hours, and the reason was because there were issues at the school, they couldn't get flight time, they kept swapping instructors, kept swapping aircraft, and 90 hours just basically meant that he had more experience in terms of flight hours than someone who'd passed with 45 hours. This got me thinking, and that's the point where I started talking to other people and asking quietly, how many hours did you do before you passed your PPL? And the numbers were quite surprising. As I said, the average seems to be 50 plus. I've had a spread from 50 right up to, I think the highest was 130. For a lot of people, it's a very personal thing, and it's down to so many different criteria. Availability of aircraft, availability of instructors, cost. At the end of the day, flying and learning to fly is expensive. If it takes you 2 months to save up enough money to go flying for 2 hours, it's going to take you longer. And you'll also find that those 2 hours, you spend some of the time, because you're not flying on a regular basis, recapping stuff that you've done before. So you end up, it's going to take you longer. For me personally, I started learning to fly before the COVID lockdowns. We had large chunks of time where we couldn't fly. Then when we started getting into circuits, I felt that I spent an enormous amount of time in circuits and then realised I'm flying at Elstree. Elstree has one runway, which can be used from either end, and has effectively 4 circuits. The problem with Elstree is the circuits aren't your usual rectangular, nice, go from here, crosswind, downwind, base, final. No, they're sort of this shape sometimes where you have to go around specific buildings, across specific fields, and you end up with quite a complex circuit. It's quite difficult to learn. I spent some time doing circuits at another aerodrome where I had to fly to the aerodrome to go and do the circuits, so that soon added up on the flight time. I also did a student flyout, which was a fantastic experience, and as a student, if you ever get the opportunity to do a flyout with your club, do so. For me, it was flying from Elstree down to Sandown, and then from Sandown back to Elstree. A good 3 hours worth of flying in real circumstances, with a little bit less of the whole instructor sitting next to you talking you through the skills. It was much more, we're going flying today, let's enjoy this. And it was actually my first grass runway landing, which was great fun. And Sandown, if you ever go to Sandown, go meet Danny and Sid. Sid's an infamous member of staff, but brilliant place to go. Always a great destination for GA flying. Highly recommend it. I also had a couple of opportunities to fly with my wife. Yes, I'm a student. No, students generally can't take passengers, but what we did was we stuck my wife in the back with the instructor, and we went flying. I'm a strong believer trying to involve the rest of your family in your flying experiences, because then you're less likely to have them whinge when you want to go flying. They're more likely to go, "Can I come?" which in my case is what's happened. I flew in virtually every weather condition it was possible to fly in. Sometimes the flights were slightly curtailed because the weather came in faster than we expected, always being safe and always under the instruction of an instructor, but it was a good experience. One of the disadvantages, I think, for people, if they're learning to fly, let's say February, March time, when the weather's starting to get better, and they then qualify in September, they've spent most of their time in nice weather. They've never had to deal with frosty conditions or cold fronts coming in and horrible wintry style weather. Where if you're learning to fly during the later part of the year, you end up having more experience of British weather. So I did over 100 hours. Do I think any of that time was wasted? No. Every single flight I flew, I felt I learnt something. It might have been little tiny things, it might have been massive things. I spent a few hours after my first skills test revising to try and get through the skills part of my skills test the second time around. I spent inordinate amounts of time doing steep turns, because steep turns seem to be my nemesis. I spent a little bit of time practicing PFLs just to try and get them perfect. And when it came to the test day and I had an opportunity to demonstrate my newfound skills of being able to do steep turns, I was happy, I was comfortable doing them. Both the steep turns and the PFLs came off without a major hitch. I passed my skills test the second time around. Yes, with 100 plus hours, it's worked out to be quite expensive. And in fact, I'm doing a video about how much does it cost. But at the end of the day, I spent over 100 hours flying an aeroplane. And that's the reason I started learning to fly. That's the reason I want to fly. I'm flying an aeroplane. I'm up there with the birds. Okay, they're a little bit better at it than I am. They don't have a big swirly engine in the front that's spinning around making lots of noise and heat. But I was flying an aeroplane for over 100 hours. That's why I fly. And hopefully, that's why you fly. Anyway, if you like what I'm doing, please consider a thumbs up. And please consider subscribing to the channel. If you have any questions about what I'm doing or what I've done, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to answer them. I asked other pilots whilst I was learning to fly, and they helped me along. I'd love to help you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, have safe flights and have fun. Bye!